Hello and welcome to the Firefox console and the debugger. And welcome to a tutorial on HaxeLive or a discussion on HaxeLive and perhaps bringing you live preview capabilities for the purposes of creating user interfaces in your projects. So what is HaxeLive? HaxeLive is as I mentioned, a project that provides live preview capabilities. It is the idea that you can parse JSON files and have them instantaneously provide you with feedback within the application that's currently running, so that you don't have to have the tedium of creating a user interface using purely code and then obviously having to rebuild that and then launching the application, seeing if it looks good. If it doesn't, make a few tweaks, then you have to recompile, launch again, and then you have to rinse and repeat until you get a user interface that works. You don't need to do any recompilation with HaxeLive. It's just a case of parsing a JSON file, refreshing the screen once the JSON file has been modified, and essentially reflecting on that. So it is quite simply a very easy way of prototyping together a user interface so that you can create a user interface that's useful for your game development or user interface journey. So this is the repository that I've got up here. It is in my user account at the moment. I might put it in its own account maybe at some point, but I'm not 100% sure yet. But this is the repository. So what you would need to do is in command prompt, you would do HaxeLib git, and then you would follow that up by typing in the name of the library, which is HaxeLive. That is what it is in HaxeLib.json, which is here. And then what you would need to do is copy and paste this URL up here into your command prompt like that. Obviously I'm not going to do that because I've already updated it and installed it into my HaxeLib, so I don't need to do that. So let's go to Flash Develop. This is a HaxeLive test. I've put in a few logos, the Hax logo, the HTML5 logo, the OpenFL logo, two versions of it, just because I can. So what you would need to do is you create an OpenFL project. There's only one backend for this at the moment, which is of course OpenFL, as you probably gathered. So you create a project in OpenFL, you've got your XML file. Set it up as you would like. I've set it up so that I've got assets, path, image, and info included. In my info folder, I have a file called base.json, which contains this basically. So I'll go through that in a moment. So in order to actually get it working, what you'll need to do is import HaxeLive.live. That is a type def. It will determine what library you're using, and it will then use the backend depending on which library you're using. So if it's OpenFL, then it will use the OpenFL backend. If you're using car, when I eventually implement that, then it'll use the car backend, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do is create a local variable. It's very easy to implement. To add live to it, all you need to do is initialize it. Because it is a type def, auto-completion doesn't really work, so it's just a case of simply knowing. It's going to, all of the basic code base and API is exactly the same and will be exactly the same across all different backends, so you don't need to change anything with this code whatsoever, regardless of what backend you use. So what I'm going to do is put into the path to the JSON formatted file that I want to live preview, which in this case is going to be base.json inside the info folder. And then add child live. Live is a sprite in OpenFL. Live will always be whatever the container is for that particular backend. So if it's HTML5, then it's probably going to be a div container. If it is OpenFL, then obviously it's going to be a sprite. If it's car, it's probably going to be an image. If it's anything else, HaxeFlix or whatever, it's always going to have a container, so that it's just simply add child live or append HTML live, something like that. The only line you'll pretty much change is this line here, right, that says add child live for each of the different backends. So that is pretty much all you need to do. Everything is done within live, so we don't need to do anything else. That is it, quite literally. That's all you need to do. Simple, huh? So now let's go on to base.json, which is in our bin folder. So this is we're going to get a type of bitmap. So there's 4 different types. We've got simple button, bitmap, text, and sprite. Now, certain ones have certain required fields in order for it to function and work properly. So you need to be careful about parsing it. If you don't provide certain fields, the application will probably crash and you'll have to relaunch once you fix the problem. But it shouldn't be too difficult once you get your head around it. Excuse me. So, the most important thing in our root object is to provide 2 different fields. We've got instance type and name, right? So the instance type is very important. Well, it's not as important as, let's say, the type field in each of the different objects and contents, but it's still relatively important if you wish to reuse this particular scene once it's been generated. So if you were to reuse this somewhere else, in another JSON file, for example, then you would give it an instance type so that you can use that type elsewhere. So I've called it base class. The name is going to be my base class. That's also relatively important. You don't need to give it a name, but it is still relatively important if you wish to make sure that it is generated correctly in code. It's also relatively important because if you want to attach events to your scene, then it is likely that you'll need to get the object by name and then attach events via that name, if that makes sense to you. Maybe. And then of course you've got the contents, which is a series of objects which is going to contain multiple different types, whether that's bitmaps, text, simple buttons, etc. Obviously it will depend on the backend. I'm hoping the type name just stays the same throughout, just for simplicity's sake. I'm trying to make sure that the code base or the JSON structure doesn't become too complicated on a per backend basis, but there will probably be differences between them. Certain differences. This is particularly true with text, because different backends have different implementations on text. They might not have things like word wrap, or whether it can be selected or not, right? So there is a relatively big difference between them. Again, I've only got one backend available, so let's not discuss that too much. So in here, I have a type of bitmap. I'm going to give it a name of HaxeLogo, and the source is going to be the HaxeLogo.png. I am going to align it to -1. Now, any negative number means that it is going to align to the screen in some way. So -1 is going to align to the top of the screen. -2, it's going to align to the left of the screen. -3 is the right, and -4 is the bottom of the screen. Then you've also got 0, which is through to 3, and that is again top, left, right, bottom, respectively. The difference between them is that the 0 to 3 aligns to the parent. If the parent is the screen, then it really makes no difference. But if the parent is, for example, in another sprite, then it will make a difference. So just be sure about that. And then you've also got two other values, which is 3, which is 4, 5, and 6, which, if I remember correctly, is center vertically, center horizontally, and just center in the middle of that sprite or screen. If we go over to the wiki, just to be 100% positive, it's under positioning, alignment, and flow. If we go over to this one here, it centers the object. So yeah, 4, it centers the object, 5 centers the object only vertically, and 6 centers the object only horizontally. This is all under static alignment. You can, of course, set the X and Y yourself. If you do that, you're overriding alignment or any flow in any way, shape, or form. So you need to be a bit careful about that. So if you want to be a bit more precise about the location of an object, then you can do that. Although personally I would recommend using alignment simply because it's easier to make sure that your objects are flowing in the direction that you want it to flow, or perhaps aligning objects to and from things. So let's test this instead of actually adding a different object to the screen. So I know this is already up and built, so let's just build it. So this is the Haxe logo. This is what it looks like currently. So what I can do is leave it open, and I can add another bitmap if I want to. So let's go ahead and do that, so that we can identify that the live previewing does in fact work. So I'm going to add a type, which is going to be a bitmap. I'm going to provide a name. That name is going to be, let's say, HTML5 logo. Bitmap source. That is going to be image/html5.png. Of course, case sensitive. Be careful about that. I'm going to align this to this logo here. So what I want to do is provide the name of the the name of the image that I want to align this object to, which is why you need to provide the name, because if you don't provide the name, then you're not going to be able to do this functionality. So I want to align to the Haxe logo. I then want to provide where I want it to be aligned. So if we go back to here again, we can see that it goes from 0 to 3, and 0 means that the location of the object is going to be left of the named, 1 is above, 2 is right, and 3 is below. Let's set it to 2 even, so that we can see that it goes to the left, the right even, sorry. And then last but by no means least, we've got padding, so I'm going to make that 2. And then what I'm going to do is provide an alpha, which by default is going to be 1 anyway, but for the sake of for the sake of demonstration, put it there anyway. So now that's immediately appeared because it's automatically identifies that the file that was modified, and then it regenerates the scene. So what I can do is modify the alpha if I wanted to, and now it looks a bit darker. Let's change that back. So now what I'd like to do is, because this looks a bit large, let's reduce the height of it, shall we? So I can do that. So let's provide 400. Let's see how that looks. Looks okay, I suppose. Okay, let's adjust the width a bit. What is the original width of it? I think it's about 500, so let's make it 400. Okay, 410 maybe? 420. This is the great thing about live preview. You can just simply change the values, save it, and then it automatically adjusts for you. 440 perhaps. It's still rendering slightly not how we like it. 450 maybe. 460 is almost how we want it. 480, almost. 490, 500 then. Yeah, almost. That'll do. Oops, not like that. How about this? So as you can see, it automatically aligns to the right of this logo here. I know the maths isn't perfect. I'm not a mathematician by any stretch, but I'm still trying to perfect it. So this is an example of how you can use live previewing. We can of course add text and other things like that. So what you can also do is create another file that I can then live preview, and I can use this class in that file. So in order for me to actually do that, what I will actually need to do is actually build another class. I will need to rebuild it for this particular test. So what I'll do is create another text file in here, test.json, and in test.json I am going to provide a field called requires. This field is extremely important because it needs to know if you are going to be using types that have been initiated or constructed or generated, whatever your philosophical bend is, and that is going to be base class. I want to be able to use that type, so it is important that I require that file. So what the generator does is it goes through each of the different files within that requires. It's going to generate those first, and then it's going to map the generated file in as a sprite into a mapped variable. I'm going to then provide an instance type here. I'm going to call it main scene. I'm going to provide it a name. I'm just going to call it my scene, and then contents, which of course is important. So in here, what I can do is provide a type, and I'm going to call that type what this type is, which is base class. So I can provide that type into here, and I'm going to give it a name of my derived class, maybe, when I can finally type. And then in here I am going to, let's say, set the align to, or actually, yeah, I'll provide an X position and a Y position. So I could make the X position 50 and the Y position 50 as well. Actually, no, let's leave it like that. So we'll be able to identify that it actually shifts 50 pixels from the right. And that's all we need to do there. So now what I'd like to do is just simply build this project. So I'm going to build it. It's going to copy those files into the bin directory, and then we can open it and see the changes. And as you can see, it has shifted to the right. So if we close this one down and we go into our bin folder, go into test, let's see if so I can shift it to the right a bit more, see if I like it. Again, 100 maybe. Is that good? Looks okay. So it's almost in the center pretty much. And obviously when we resize it, it doesn't exactly resize per se, but you can of course implement resize events so that if you want to enable stretching or whatever, you can do that. So that's a demonstration of HaxeLive. I hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you very much.